Today we're looking at an easy way to get a great first layer, but it's not the way that you're thinking. So let's talk about build plates. There's a couple of different varieties, from flexible to rigid, textured and smooth. This is an especially fancy one because it's got a cool texture that gets embedded in the first layer of your print. I love this idea because usually the bottom layer of your print is kind of an area of inconsistency, and it's something that you have to live with when you're making designs. Like, often you have to design around the fact that the bottom of your print's gonna look kind of goofy and not homogeneous with the rest of your print. And because it exhibits artifacts and a surface finish that's a little bit different than the rest of your print, we usually try and hide this surface. But products like this are great because it takes something that's an inherent weakness and turns it into a feature or a strong point. I think it's totally cool. I think it's a great idea. That's why I spent my own money on it to review this sucker. That's right. BigTree sent us the Panda Touch, and you can watch that video if you'd like. But this one came straight out of Corey's wallet, baby. So much. So let's do some printing with different materials. I want to talk about the product a little bit and if I think it's going to stand the test of time based on what I've seen from similar entries in this product category. After that, we're going to touch on different kinds of build surfaces that I've used in the past and how it kind of compares to those, how we've arrived at this kind of build plate. Then finally, I want to speak on where this comes up short, because again, it's not perfect. But you can find this plate linked in the description if you do decide you want to pick one up for yourself. To begin my journey of discovery, I decided, let's just start printing some things. First filament, PETG. If you weren't aware, PETG can absolutely bond to your build surface if you don't have an interface layer of glue or something to help it release. We learned this together in one of our past videos. With that in mind, I decided to use this clear Overture PETG that I have sitting around, and I didn't use an interface layer at all. You might think I forgot, and I kind of forgot, but also, I did want to do a bit of a torture test on this build plate to just see how it was going to stand up. Though it might have been wise to wait until I had done some other successful prints before rolling the dice on this, but the print had started, the PETG was already on there, so what could really be done? Luckily, this PETG nacho self-released, and we were able to continue with the review as normal. Next, I wanted to print this ammo box for a buddy of mine. I'll have this designer linked below because his attention to detail is really good, and he's got like a billion different variations. So if this is the kind of thing that you're interested in, check the link in the description. But back to that ammo box. So this first plate didn't turn out super well. There were some stray runs of filament and there were a couple of spots that didn't seem to adhere very well. And additionally, there were some places where it looked like the filament was bunching up or over extruding and then under extruding just after that. So generally not an ideal result for a first print in PLA. But when I looked at the slicer, I found out that I never changed the build plate from the regular textured PEI bed to a smooth bed, so that probably had something to do with it. Though these are just cosmetic issues, the print still functions fine, but the whole point of this plate is cosmetic stuff, so we should try and make it look good anyway. The second box that I printed did better than the first. It was successful as well, and it seemed to have a much better finish, although there were still a couple of spots that it didn't look like the bed was holding the print properly. Not quite there, but that got to like 95% of the way, so I wanted to move on to something a little bit more difficult. Since we were having a little bit of adhesion issues, I wanted to really make sure we had a lot more adhesion issues. Historically, I've had trouble with matte filaments sticking to the spring steel beds, so I decided to take not only a matte filament, but a wood grain filament that notoriously does not stick well to these beds, and print a model with that. And as if that filament selection wasn't going to be difficult enough for this bed that seemed to be having a little bit of trouble holding on, well, I decided to use a model that had a pretty complicated first layer. And then I also decided to print out a batch of 8 of them. And then I sent this print to the printer and had to go run some errands, so I couldn't even really babysit it to see if it was going to be successful or not. I did, however, hop on the Bambu app to watch it to see if it failed, and then it wouldn't connect. So I was stuck out doing errands for several hours while this print was either spitting spaghetti or printing just as normal. So it was pretty unfortunate that I wasn't able to catch it before it went through the entire duration of the print. If it was failing and it knocked one of the models off, then it was just going to keep going and use up all the filament just like normal. But when I got home and checked on it, everything worked fine. The print didn't fail. Despite my efforts to really stress out this build plate, I guess selecting the correct build plate in the slicer made a big enough difference that this filament and this model wasn't enough to make it fail. The plate held on. Though there were a couple of spots that didn't stick super well, just a few minor ones, everything stuck pretty well, all things considered. So a good result, but also kind of mixed. And I guess I'll cover that more at the end, but let's talk about this plate itself. As far as I can tell, this thing's just a sticker on a big spring steel plate. Usually these kinds of plates are just stickers stuck to a big piece of spring steel. And that's fine. Like, I'm pretty certain Bambu uses stickers on some of their build plates, and even offer replacement stickers for when those stickers wear out. And you just take the old sticker off and clean the plate and then put the new sticker on, and it's totally fine. I haven't had any issues with the Bambu build plates yet, but I've only run the gold textured PEI powder coated ones. So those ones aren't just stickers on plates. I think they're actually just a powder coating, probably a little bit more durable. So I say that this is a sticker on a build plate a lot in this video, but as I dug into it more, it's not just a sticker on a build plate, it's actually like powder coat on a build plate, or some kind of sprayed media on a build plate. So it's probably going to be pretty durable. But anyway, every time you hear me say sticker on a build plate, not a sticker on a build plate. But in the case of like the Bambu engineering plate, or a cool textured one like this, there may be some trade-offs. Like, the major things that I hear about these is bubbling and delaminating, the sticker starting to come free, or in some cases the sticker sticks to the print and gets ripped when you remove it from the plate. I imagine this is more likely in the no-name brands that you'd get on no-name websites, but given enough heat cycles and prints, I could see this happening to any of them. Not a deal breaker, just something to keep in mind. That all said, I'm happy to report this plate looks pretty good. I was skeptical at first, because this is my first sticker style build plate, not a sticker on a build plate. And I don't have the best track record with build plates in general, but this one seems to be holding up just fine. I had my doubts because I had seen a couple of reviews on similar styles of build plates, but BigTree came to play, baby. So how does this plate compare? Who's this plate made for? Or better yet, why does it exist at all? Well, I'm not 100% certain, but I do want to cover different surfaces and their different strengths. I think comparing this to other surfaces that have come before it might shed a little bit of light on how we arrived at this kind of a plate. So flashback to 2021. Everybody's picking up new hobbies and learning new skills because we're coming off of a worldwide pandemic and everybody's been cooped up inside their houses. I was no different. I had some money set aside and I was going to buy myself a laser engraver so I could make some stuff. But at the last minute, I decided I would buy a 3D printer instead. As a side note, I got sent a laser engraver a couple of months back, which totally made this a full circle situation because that was the thing that ended up making me buy a 3D printer. And then I made a 3D printer YouTube channel and that got me a laser engraver. And it was super cool to finally be able to mess with one of these. Check out the video if you're interested. Back to the story. So I got a hold of a FlashForge Adventurer printer and set about learning what it meant to be a 3D print nerd. This printer was relatively user-friendly for the offerings that were available at the time, but it was super tiny in terms of build volume, and it took like 1/2 kilogram spools only, which was kind of weird. And it also had this silly textured spring steel build plate. I didn't like it. But one printer is not enough. So I quickly got another one to add to the fleet, in the form of an Ender 3 V2. That baby came with a glass print bed and we were off to the races, baby. Ya like that? I was a fan of the glass print bed because it was a lot more durable than the FlashForge spring steel bed. Look, I was still learning how to use the machines and there may have been a couple of incidents where I ran the nozzle into the bed a few times, maybe. But when that kind of thing happened on a glass bed, it wasn't nearly as big of a deal, So I had totally become a glass bed evangelist. If you'd ask me which print surface I prefer, it's going to be glass, no matter what. Until December 2023. That's when it all changed.
What's up, people? We're going to do another unboxing. This week we got the Bambu Labs Mini Combo.
A1 Mini.
Yeah, that's what I said.
You see, that's when Corey and I got a hold of our first Bambu machine. And of course the rest is history. Now, the glass bed still has a lot of advantages. There's a lot of reasons to use them, but I personally don't anymore. For one thing, the surface finish on a glass bed is super smooth, and the bottom of your prints look great as a result. You're not getting that with a spring steel bed, at least not the same way. The other thing, like we spoke about, is the durability. Like, run the nozzle into this thing all day, it's not a big deal. I mean, you may scratch it, but it's going to take quite a bit of doing before you get to the point where you actually damage the thing. Not to mention the bed adhesion is superb. I never had nearly as many bed adhesion issues until I started using the spring steel beds. Though they're not that bad, and not nearly as bad as I thought they would be, the glass bed tends to hold on, especially to PLA, quite a bit better, at least in my experience. But why do I run textured PEI spring steel beds then? That just don't make sense. Well, the answer to that question is a matter of evolution and convenience. You see, printers aren't made the same way that they were made back when I got into it, even though it was only 2 years ago. There's been a lot of evolution since then. For one thing, these printers are way smarter than I am, so they don't run the nozzle into the build plate like I do. They're not dum-dums. They do crazy stuff like level themselves before every print, so you have a perfect first layer. They have slicer options that adjust the first layer heights to account for different build surfaces. And it's not just the printers that have been getting better, it's the build surfaces themselves that have taken leaps in technology. The build surfaces, though they're spring steel, they're using different materials that stay stickier longer. You can get these different textures for different cosmetic purposes and different functional purposes depending on what filaments you're trying to print with. And since the standards have been raised across the board, you get third parties like BigTree Tech coming out with build plates like this that are extra durable to match this new level of printer that they're dealing with. Right, so new plates, they're pretty impressive. And this plate is also pretty impressive, but I'm not certain I can make it my daily driver just yet. It seems to hold the print well enough, it seems plenty durable and seems to be well made in that regard, but it's also kind of a one-trick pony. And there's a couple of things I want to mention just in case you're trying to get a hold of one of these. It's stuff that you may just want to be aware of. Not necessarily deal breakers, but things that you should know before you spend your money on it. So the first little detail that I want to cover is the actual depth of the texture on this sucker. The ridges on the design are actually way more pronounced than I was originally expecting them to be. Other similar plates that I've seen online seem to have a lot finer texture or a lot more shallow profile that doesn't protrude into the print as much, while still replicating the image onto the print. I'm not sure that this is a good or bad thing. I'm not sure if it makes the effect stronger or weaker in this case, but I imagine if you're dealing with tight tolerances and that first layer really needs to be dimensionally accurate, this is a consideration. If you're sticking to purely cosmetic stuff and that level of functionality isn't quite so vital, you'd probably be fine. This isn't really a concern. The other thing I kind of touched on earlier was the adhesion. It's fine, but even still, when selecting the correct plate, I'd say it's 95% of the way there. There's still that 5% that's not quite dialed in. The starts and stops particularly don't always get anchored down well enough and occasionally cause some artifacts in that first layer. Otherwise, the only note I have regards durability, which we already spoke about. I haven't had enough time to really print with this thing to see how it's going to stand the test of time. I did try to give it as hard of a time as I could, and I think it performed really well, but it is a sticker on a piece of spring steel, not a sticker on a build plate, so who knows how that's going to stand up. So it's probably going to be pretty durable. But for now, this is a pretty good deal. The plate's really good, it's built really well, it's only 25 bucks, and if you get 2 of them, then that's 50 bucks free shipping, so it's a pretty good deal. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you've used these build plates before, or what build surface you are running. If you want to continue the discussion a little bit, hop on over to our Patreon, where I'll have the discussion open and we can chat a little bit more directly. Bye!